All right, so everyone, we're happy to welcome today Ryan Rich, the National Sales Recruiter with Total Quality Logistics, or TQL. Ryan's been with TQL for 4 years as a logistics account executive, and then he's been national sales recruiter since August of 2017. Has a degree from North Greenville University in Tigerville, South Carolina, where he was a member of the baseball team, if I remember correctly. And so we're happy to have Ryan with us today. So I'm going to go ahead and mute my camera and microphone, share my screen, and Ryan, the floor will be yours.
Fair enough. Appreciate it, Jay. And yes, I did play baseball, but I tell everyone I acted like I did. I played the part at least. So no, I appreciate you again setting this up, and for everyone joining in. I know times are a little different, and this isn't as the norm, I would say, than usual, but we make do with what we have. So with technology, if you guys can't hear me, if I cut out, I glitch, if I'm making a really awkward face and the camera freezes, then just don't pay attention to that. But other than that, I want to make this extremely conversational. So if anybody has any questions as I run through some details, as I go over whether it's the company, again, we're focusing on just kind of the interview process as a whole. Unmute your mic and ask me right away. I'm completely fine. I talk extremely fast, so if anybody needs to tell me to slow down, then let me know. You can put it in the chat, whatever works. Wave your hands and let me know. But yeah, like Jay said, so I've been with the company. Next month would have been 4 years in total. So I actually started 2 weeks after my graduation date. I interviewed and accepted the offer about a month and a half out. And then I officially started again 2 weeks after my graduation. So I can completely assure all of you that I've been in your shoes before. So I know what it's kind of like, obviously, trying to focus on finishing strong and finally get that piece of paper and then, start. But yeah, I started in our Greenville, South Carolina office, where I'm originally from. Assuming most of you from Charlotte may have heard of Greenville, about an hour and a half from here. And was in the sales position for about a year and a half, roughly. So I saw a lot of success and I saw a lot of challenges. But we were physically without a recruiter, I think, for about 6 months or so. So realizing how passionate I was about the position that I was in, I just really wanted to be the person that found the right talent to grow the office there, because we had about, I'd say, 20 people in that office. So I transitioned to the national recruiting role, and then as of about 2 years ago, I transferred to our Charlotte, North Carolina office. Wanted to be part of a bigger team and a bigger office for personal reasons, bigger city. So I transitioned from about 30 people there to about 130 or so in the Charlotte office, and been here since. Also on this call, I do have our recruiting manager of our region. His name is Paul, Paul Banks. I don't know if, Paul, can you hear me, if you want to get a chance to introduce yourself? Might have some technical difficulties, but yeah. So Paul's based out of our Richmond, Virginia office. So he's been with the company, I'd say, about 5 or so years, and oversees about 8, 9 offices in our region, all on the East Coast. So, but yeah. So obviously today, obviously we're talking about the interview process, right? So before we go into that, to talk a little bit about the company. So Total Quality Logistics, I guess, has anybody ever heard of TQL? Again, if you guys have had any questions or able to answer anything, you can put it in the chat or whatever works. But yeah, so we are a third-party logistics firm. We're the second largest in North America. So kind of before we go into what we do, although we really provide an essential service within the logistics industry, or transportation, of course, we define ourselves as a sales organization, right? Because we have to attract and maintain customers who have to manage and move their freight shipments, right? So if you really think about it, all types of brokerages, right, if it's financial services or real estate or the logistics industry, right, are based upon two sales being made at or on each end of the deal, right? So two ends of the customer for us are the people that are paying us to handle their shipments. So it could be a small mom and pop to a company like Walmart or Publix. Those are some companies that we do work with. And then the carrier or the trucking companies who we're paying to physically move their products. So a big thing that's unique about our business model is we do handle their pickup or their shipments from pickup to delivery. So a lot of 3PLs or third-party logistics companies break up their customer and their carrier division. So basically, there could be one person dealing with the client and taking the order for the shipments, and then a different person that's actually booking the carrier and talking to the driver who's picking up and delivering that. So our reps handle both the logistics and the side, or the sales side of the transaction, and basically serve as a one point of contact. That way, you're not talking to multiple people. So that way, we're able to kind of focus on having, or I would basically say you're not going to have as many communication issues or mistakes on shipments, and really focus on building long-term relationships and trust. So again, 3PL is a third-party logistics company. And we're also non-asset based. You might see that when you look up our company, you type in TQL, it'll say a non-asset based third-party logistics company. And what that basically just means is we don't own our own trucks. We work with a network of about 85,000 carriers nationwide that are actually moving that product. And the benefit and the advantage that really does give a company like ourselves is, there's not a situation where we can't find a truck for a customer, or we can really guarantee that we're going to find a carrier and pinpoint that communication on exactly when they're going to be picking up and delivering the product, as opposed to a truck, only being limited in certain areas, if that does make sense. So that's just a little bit of background on the company. Now, obviously, the interview process, I want everyone to understand this is not just the interview process catered to what we do here, but more so just interviewing any company anywhere, right? So in this kind of conversation, we'll discuss different types of interviews, the different steps that kind of can occur in those interview processes, how you can prepare to ensure a smooth process, and just some overall general tips on what to do. Obviously, of course, with that, what not to do, right, during the interview process. And the reason why this is so important is just because you can be fully prepared for an interview, understand all the questions that they might ask, but your skill set, your background might align perfect with the job you're shooting for, but in reality, the way that you're able to present yourself and the experiences you had really can leave the impression or be the ultimate reason you might end up landing the job or not. So obviously, the first section is really to understand the different types of interviews, and the first one being really just a standard interview, right? That's usually just really conversational, or generally asking you standard questions to get to know you better and see if you are going to be a good fit for the role of the company. So you can expect to walk through your resume and overall details. You could be asked any questions about your background or experiences, strengths and weaknesses, and overall your interest in the company and long-term goals, right? So that's just very standard get to know you kind of interviews. And then, of course, there's behavioral. I guess, does anyone know or have an understanding what a behavioral interview is? So basically, behavioral interviews are just more so asking questions about how you handle certain situations, right? So really it's focusing on, let's say, past situations. Employers can then kind of predict what kind of future behavior you'll have kind of in the long run. So this is really one of the most common interview types. You can expect questions like, tell me about a time when this or XYZ happens. Other than that, we have case interviews. They're frequently used, I would say, more in the consulting industry. So the focus in this interview type is usually just specific to business issues. So it might include quantitative or complex questions that give interviewers a glimpse into basically your overall thought process. Panel interviews, of course, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's multiple people at once, so each person might have a list of questions to ask you, and all might have different interviewing styles. And then other than that, there is technical interviews, which tends to be a little bit more specific to certain positions or industries, let's say like IT or other specialized fields. So they can consist of like challenges, word problems, brain teasers, puzzles, things of that nature. So going on to the interview process, the first thing we're going to cover really, of course, is just the process itself. So the reason why it's so important is to understand it's going to be different for every company. So a candidate really could go through anywhere from one to several interview stages. So some of the more interview or common interview stages, the first being just an overall initial screening and testing. So typically the interview process will begin with some sort of initial screen depending on the role. It could be a culture assessment, a thinking test, or just an overall basic conversation with a recruiter to determine if the candidate is the right fit for a role. For example, here at TQL, we do send candidates a few pre-interview questions, we like to call them. So It's just like, tell us about yourself, what interested you in the company, and being able to look at those, you can kind of see on paper, what the candidate's thinking, what they're really looking for, what their general expectations are and interests of the position. Other than that, a lot of companies do tend to throw in job shadows into part of their interview process. Probably, and honestly, personally at TQL, this is my favorite part of the interview process because it does give you a realistic view of maybe the environment or what to expect out of day-to-day from a successful rep. So you'll be able to sit with them, kind of shadow and interview with them basically on what their day-to-day job is. So the biggest thing I think to keep in mind is if you ever do a job shadow with any company, right? They might sit you with a sales rep or just any other person in the company. Is regardless of how informal the shadow might be, the person you're shadowing is still an employee of the company. So I would say that person will more than likely be asked to report back just kind of on your behavior on the conversation. So my advice usually is to always err on the professional side. They might get to know you, say what's up, kick it back in their desk, but in reality, you don't want to be pulling out your phone or looking away or not asking questions. You want to be prepared to kind of converse with that person as if they're going to be the manager that's going to be interviewing, right? Other than that, obviously most people can kind of make the assumption phone interviews is the next step, and that really just kind of takes place in the beginning of the process. It really just allows employers to get a deeper level and understanding without the commitment, I would say, of bringing that candidate on site into the office quite yet. Face-to-face interviews, of course, they're going to be done, I would say, more to the middle to the end of the process. So you're invited to come on site, meet in person with the employer, and get a feel of the actual culture and team that you are interviewing for. And this is more of a personal feel, right? First impressions, getting to put a face on the name. And if necessary, face-to-faces can be done through video, through programs like Skype or HireVue, WebEx, of course, which we'll talk a little bit further in depth. I know that a lot of people, most companies out there currently are doing virtual interviews due to current circumstances. So other than that, last step is really final interviews. So that's going to be done with a higher profile employee like a manager or an executive. So this person usually is going to be that person that's making that initial decision on when to hire the person or not. So other than that, although you might be extensively prepared for the interview and the questions, again, the reality is you don't know always what's going to be thrown at you. So your best bet is really to prepare for the common interview questions, and for the rest, be prepared to think on your toes and really come up and think of creative responses that sets you apart. So to kind of go on to common interview questions, again, feel free to kind of throw into the chat if anybody has any kind of common interview questions they've been asked or what they think might be a common interview question. Some of them being, again, tell us about yourself. That's usually the first initial question. What do you really know about the company or the organization? Others, why do you want the job? Why would you be successful at the job? There is a list of common interview questions. Honestly, if you go to Google, you can really look them up and find them online and prepare for the interview. So although it's a good idea to have responses crafted, I know when I interviewed for TQL back in 2016, I literally wrote in a notebook, I think it was like 15 questions that I possibly thought they could ask me, and I wrote paragraphs full of answers of different routes that I could take, right? So always over-prepare for those questions, but just be aware that when delivering those responses that it doesn't sound scripted, if that makes sense. You want to practice with yourself, look in the mirror, kind of record yourself. The goal is to sound like yourself and not be a robot, right? Also, it's also to have a good idea to really set apart situational questions and experiences that draw from more of a behavioral type of kind of view. So think of like I would say a group project that you maybe worked on, or where you had to take lead on a tough partner or dealt with a tough partner. So think about that obstacle you recently overcame in your life, and you really want to have these situations at the top of your mind so you can remember and mold them into the questions you're being asked. Other obviously questions that you're going to be asked typically in the interview process, again, regardless of where it is, could be why did you choose this company? What are your favorite, most challenging parts of your job that you have now? Could you tell me about the training and understanding of this position? So you should always have questions for the interview also too. At the end of it, I think that's one of the most important things is even though you might feel like you've asked everything that you need to know in the previous stages of the interview process, questions really can help reiterate that you're really interested in the job. I'm an extremely casual interviewer. I try to be more informational than anything, and provide you with all the details so I can look back and know there should be no sections that they missed on what to expect out of this job. But it's always good to have questions prepared because, again, it just shows your true interest in the position. So if you feel like you're in a situation where, honestly, I have no questions, everything's really answered, think about questions that, hasn't been really catered to the company, right? So ask the interviewer about their experiences and their personal career path and why they chose the company or the role that they're in. So other than that, kind of going on to the first thing, I mean, we can talk about the interview all day, but honestly, the resume is going to be the first thing. The reason why is first impressions really are everything, although a lot of companies might not really look too in-depth into your resume. It's going to be the first thing that they see. It's going to be the first thing they think about of you is, do they look like a clean-cut professional person or not? So the resume that you can see here, of course, is just a brief example. Thomas Edison, some of you have probably heard of him. It's distracting. It's somewhat unprofessional if the interview is for a typical business interview. Now, yes, of course, you can sometimes probably get away with this if it's more of a creative interview or type of position in a different field. But for the sake of this presentation, I would say, let's say you want a business job in a corporate environment, right? So it really doesn't have start dates, end dates. Some of the dates are written in different formats. The biggest thing is you're going to want to make sure that you do have a couple people look at your resume when you do kind of craft that, have people help. I know career services usually at most universities and of course at UNCC do have contacts and other people that can help you with things of this nature. But if you kind of go on to that next slide, yep, that's going to show you that example of just a very standard clean-cut resume, right? It's organized, it's formatted, it's really easy to read. So some of the difference you can kind of notice in those is there is an objective and you can kind of see what the person's looking for. You can see, okay, they worked here and this is when they started, this is when they left. These are some of the general just skills and expectations that they can bring to the table. So obviously preparing, you want to know your resume like the back of your hand. Obviously most people usually bring in a resume to interviews, which I personally usually recommend to everyone. Come to an interview whatever stage, if it's the first interview or if it's the last interview, have a resume to hand to them and have a resume for yourself, because the last thing you want to do is be asked a question about a date and then you don't remember, right? You don't remember what you did there or whatever, right? So memorize your resume like it's your best friend. So talk out loud to yourself, someone else, talk about your experiences and your interest in a role. Like I said, you can videotape yourself. I personally never did that just because I hate the way that I sound on recordings. I don't know if anybody feels the same way. But other than that, the next step really in terms of preparation is going to be researching the company, right? So research that times 1,000. Most companies have a lot of information that you can find when you look them up on their websites or social media or whatever. TQL is pretty active on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, pretty much the whole 9 yards. But take a look at these and kind of understand and incorporate the knowledge that you find out into your interviews. So honestly, most people really can be surprised by the key points that you can impress an employer with. So for example, well, I saw that you guys were acquired in '97, for example, and that the company started because of this issue, and they wanted to kind of achieve this specific thing. And that will really be specific in letting an employer know, wow, they've actually done their research instead of just, oh, they're TQL, they're a transportation brokerage firm, right? You should also use your research to determine if the company or the opportunity seems like a good fit for you, of course. So again, look at the social media pages, gauge their culture fit, read reviews on Glassdoor to learn more about the common challenges that someone can face, whether it's good reviews or bad reviews. I mean, again, most companies you're going to get both just because every opportunity isn't the perfect fit for anyone, but you want to be able to have a full scope and understanding of what you're really getting yourself into. Other than that, completing pre-interview requirements. Again, like I said, we do have the application process, the pre-interview questions that we have people complete to get a general expectation of what they are looking for. So again, when it comes to TQL, you must apply before we can actually go through a formal phone interview. Some other companies might ask you to complete a test or an assessment before moving forward. So just make sure to complete all and any of these requirements in a timely manner, right? If they say go ahead and apply and you are interested, go right then and there when you have a free 5 minutes and apply. They want to. I think most people and employers are going to really see that initiative as opposed to they reach out to you a couple more times and then, oh yeah, I'll get around to it. That's just going to leave the employer thinking, I just don't really know if they are truly interested like they're saying. Other than that, script questions, like we discussed earlier, have questions prepared to ask the employer, and practice them out loud. Although, like I said, you don't want your questions to sound robotic or scripted, it's going to help to review them, or helps to review them ahead of time, so you're really just kind of confident and prepared for whatever gets thrown at you. Other than that, anticipating questions, you're going to want to know what your pitfalls are, right, and be prepared to talk about them. If your GPA is low, know that you might get asked about it, right? If it's high, you might get asked about it. So just be ready to explain why it was low at first, right, but that you are actively working on improving it. Or if you had a gap in your work history, right, you want to be prepared to explain that, because you can and will be asked. I can assure you at TQL that's a big thing that we hit on is, what were you doing? We want to understand your full background. We want to know what you've done and what experiences have you had, not just what you do here, what you do here, right? Everything in the middle is going to matter just as much as what you did at other jobs. Of course, anticipate, again, those types of objections or hesitations that they might have. Other than that, attire, I think, is one of the biggest things. I've gone through a lot of very interesting interviews in attire, although we tell everyone to dress business professional. Again, companies might look business casual. TQL, we're pretty casual. I got my favorite team, Panthers. I'm hoping that everyone in here is a Panthers fan. Even though the environment or the research you've done, they look extremely casual and fun, again, always geared to the professional side. So suit and tie, wearing a blouse, right? Just always be sure to dress to impress is what I tell people, right? If it's a first round, second round, final interview, whenever, right? So suit and tie, dress pants, blouses, skirts, dress pants will all do too as well. If you're ever in doubt on what to wear, I would say don't wear it. It's always better, again, to err on the professional side and be conservative. Nothing should really be too distracting, keeping jewelry simple, nail polish, neutral. I'm probably not the best person to talk to on giving advice on neutral nail polish. If you're in person, right, perfume, calling, you want to keep, or cologne, you want to keep that to a minimum. There's nothing worse than an employer being able to listen to your responses, but all they are noticing is how strong the cologne you're wearing. It's kind of, people like to say, it smells like a sixth grade gym locker room. That's not the most fun. You can't really pay attention. But other than that, cover up tattoos and body piercings. I know it's 2020, right? And you might think most companies and employers don't really care, but you know, I think, again, it's kind of just when in doubt, don't do it, right? You just never know when that one person you come in contact with is the one person that really does care, right? So other than that, the next thing I want to talk about, which is probably the most relevant thing right now, is video interviewing. I think that obviously most companies incorporate video interviews anyway in the interview process, but they're going to be conducted with actual employees, and others might be automated by software programs or ask candidates to respond to a set of questions. I think the preparation should be the exact same if you're in person or if you're going to be over the video. So the first thing is going to be the setting. Obviously, when you pull up the webcam, that's the first thing that they're going to see is where you are and what you look like. So just be aware, right? Is it your bed frame? Is it a sink full of dirty dishes? Posters up? You know, again, you want to treat it, that's why most interviews are in an office or in a clean setting, so keep it the same way on your end, clean, simple, and as professional as possible. So obviously, again, still wear business professional attire, and not just on the top, right? I think this should go without being said. You never know if you'll be asked to stand up and grab something, so best to be prepared. But also just make sure that your camera's at a good level, right? So you're eye level with the interviewer, and you're not kind of looking up and to the side or around or wherever. Other than that, really, it's going to be lighting. This is another thing. Test it ahead of time. Try to avoid lights, bright windows behind you, dark rooms, turn on a lamp, whatever's going to work. Just make sure you can see yourself and that they're going to be able to see yourself clearly as well. Obviously, other than that, interruptions and distractions. I've obviously done hundreds of interviews now over the past month and a half or so, and I think this is probably one of the toughest things because most people, and like yourselves, are probably at home, whether you got siblings or pets. My dog has tried to really interrupt many of my interviews, and while it's extremely distracting, it's best to kind of, you know, shut them out. Take 30 minutes to an hour, how long it's going to take to just limit all those types of distractions, because it could just throw you off completely like it does with my dog. Other than that, testing equipment, I mean, obviously you want to make sure cameras are working. Pretty self-explanatory, and then charging your devices. Computers, your phone, it's easy, but it's important. You don't really want to worry about anything dying in the middle of the interview when you feel like you're crushing it. So yeah, other than that though, we can really understand the interview process, your background, your resume, the interview questions. Like I said, you really want to know yourself and your resume. So really looking at transferable skills, right, and relevant experience that you have to the job that you're looking into. So one of the most important areas is being prepared to talk about yourself. An interview is about selling yourself and why you're a fit for a specific company or position. Some people might have sales experience or some people might not, but you're going to have sales experience once you get into an interview because that's what you're doing. So to kind of know what transferable skills that you have and what's relevant to the responsibilities of what you're applying to. So I think a big pro tip is reread the job description, read it 100 times if you have to, and then pick out certain qualities for the employer that they are looking for that you feel you might have. If they're really looking for someone that is going to be organized, look at positions and experiences that you had that shows that you're an extremely organized person. Anybody can say, I'm extremely detail-oriented and organized, but they're not going to know you're organized until you really show them specific examples and situations that you've been in that shows that, right? Obviously, throw in those stories, throw in those specific situations. Intangible qualities and stories that back it up, kind of what I just said. That's going to really show, I think, loyalty, your drive, your motivation, right, your initiative. So obviously have stories to back up to illustrate how you've kind of gotten that kind of motivation to that point. Obviously another one is going to be why you want this position or company. So know why you want it, or I would say over any other position, even if it's the one that's kind of second on your list. Again, you don't want to rule out any opportunity until you do have a full understanding. So you're going to want to express to them why you know this is the best fit over any other company or position out there and be ready to explain that. And then really why they should hire you over someone else or not your competition. So think about what is specific or unique about you that separates you from everybody else. Why they should hire you and not them. Let's say it's that you have a work ethic that is unmatched. If so, give an example that demonstrates that. So you're not just all talk, I would say, right? Maybe you worked 70 hours a week last summer and starting your own lawn care company, whatever it might be. You've outworked all your competitors and are now the #1 lawn care company in the town, right? That's kind of how you're going to want to relate that. So going on to the next one, I mean, obviously you want to be mindful of what not to do. I feel like a lot of these, again, should be going without being said. So for example, chewing gum. That's a big one. Swearing or using slang, speaking negative about past employers. Again, you might have absolutely thought it was the worst job in the world, but they don't want to see that you're talking negative about an employer because are you quick to judge? Are you going to be the one that's going to kind of experience a negative situation and be talking about the company that you're currently in now in the future? You just don't know. Taking out your phone or saying, I just want a job, or this is a stepping stone. That doesn't show that initiative or true motivation that this is the job that you really want. I wish I could sit here and tell you funny interview stories all day, but I would take up a lot of time if that were the case. I remember I had a candidate, and it was in the middle of the interview. I noticed they had gum in. I wanted to really see when they sat down if they would take the initiative to notice it or take it out or whatever. But I remember asking them a question, and as I was just about to finish up the question, the person blew a bubble. And, again, I kind of lay the expectation out, like, be comfortable, be yourself, like, let's have fun, let's just talk about you, talk about the job. But something like that can really make an employer question if, what they've thought about you is really what they thought up to that point, right? Now they might think, this person doesn't seem very professional, whatever the case may be. If you ever have to question whether something's appropriate or not, just don't do it, right? But other than that, obviously, again, it comes down to, like we said, it's a sales kind of opportunity when you're interviewing. You're selling yourself. You're selling why you're the right candidate. So obviously, you got to close the deal. You got to seal it. So at the end of the interview, be sure to ask for a business card or for all those that you met with. For me, there's nothing more kind of I would say nothing more stands out, I think, when a candidate says, do you have a card, or what's your email address, or sending up a follow-up email that says, I really appreciated your conversation, and Thank you for your time, right? So I would say there's no need to really be cookie cutter. And what I mean by that is, saying thank you for your time, looking forward to hearing back from you. I really enjoyed our interview, right? But kind of referencing something fun or something interesting that you discussed in your interview together that separates you apart. So, for example, you can say, I really enjoyed when you spoke about, your experience when you were in this position, then you moved to here, and, this is kind of the steps that you had to take to get there. I see that same kind of motivation through my past experience or whatever, and I'm looking very forward to it. Whatever the case may be, you just want to be specific with that and genuine, right? Ask them, obviously, again, if there's any other information that they're going to need in order to make a decision and what else they might need from you and when you can expect to hear back. I think following the steps that we've really kind of covered should put you in a confident and prepared position to take on really any interview, regardless of what the position is or whatever the company may be. So, but really, other than that, that's going to be most of the details I have. Like I said, I try to influence everyone to be prepared for whatever the company or the position is. Doesn't matter if it's in sales or transportation, but I'm sure a lot of you have had experiences over the last couple of weeks or month or so going through interviews. So I guess, does anybody have any questions or anything that they kind of had experiences in interviews that stood out to them?
Everyone, you can either unmute your microphone and ask your questions, or you can put them in the chat right now. Ryan, I'll ask one as everybody's kind of gathering their thoughts and stuff real quick. When you are evaluating a candidate, and particularly right now when we're doing a lot of video interviews and stuff, and you went over some tips of like stuff to do, how are some ways that you can stay engaged with somebody when you're trying to look through a screen and maybe, it's just different. It's not the same as sitting in front of someone. What are some things that you've seen people do that really stand out?
Yeah, that's a good question. I get asked that all the time from candidates every time I do a video interview, or sometimes candidates will kind of come back after the interview and say, like, I apologize. I know it's a little bit different. I couldn't really be myself or being over the webcam. But honestly, I think the first thing is in a candidate's shoes, remember that, although it's through a computer and times are different, like, still be yourself. Act as if you are still talking with that person face to face. If they are saying something that you agree with, show signs of that you are agreeing with them and not just sitting there being recorded, right? Still asking questions, still finding time to build personal rapport with them and asking them about, their time there, whatever the case may be. I think the biggest thing is just to really be yourself. Obviously, you might be in your bedroom, you might be in a different environment, but again, it kind of goes back to what I was saying, like, you want to treat it as if it's like any other interview, but the biggest thing is still remembering to be yourself. If it's a webcam or it's in person, I just try to lay that expectation out first. I think that's the most important thing is I tell everyone, like, please do not, like, act any differently. Don't hesitate. If you have questions, cut me off. But that's the biggest thing is just kind of, if you're someone that's loud and you're talkative, like, be that person. Don't start to shy back or be quiet. Or if you're someone that is kind of more direct, like, be direct with your questions. I think just being yourself is the biggest thing.
We do have a question here, and I'll say the specific one about TQL in just a sec, but what are ways to show your enthusiasm for a position in an interview?
Yeah, that's a good question. And again, kind of going back to a lot of interviews being virtual right now or in person, I think posture is a big thing. Sometimes when, again, some people get the feeling, again, that I'm an extremely casual interviewer. So if, a candidate is sitting like straight up and super uptight, like, I might sit back a little bit at my desk and relax. I'm kind of mirroring that person, right? If you see that the employer is sitting straight up and they're very, structured and postured, right? Like, I would mirror that. I wouldn't kind of sit back or cross your legs or tapping your feet. I think that's another big thing. When they see your tapping feet, I know that can be nervous, but you're easily distracted, whatever it is. Showing enthusiasm obviously is going to be, again, making it conversational. I think some people think that you have to be asked a question and then it's your turn, now you answer the question, but find those openings. If they, I think, really listening, and if they say something that does kind of catch your interest or something you're wanting to know about, then stop what you're doing and ask about it. I remember when I was interviewing for TQL, it was tough, man. I mean, I was a college student, and I was like, I had in my head bullet points like, I'm going to ask this question, and then I'm going to ask this question, and I'm going to ask this question. And if something threw me off, I was like having to go back in my mind, like, okay, what was my next question? I couldn't remember. And I always think that's like setting yourself up for failure. Be genuine, listen to what they're saying, and if they say something that you're interested about or want to know more about, ask about it. That's just going to show genuine enthusiasm. So other than that, smiling if they say something that makes you laugh. If you're really wanting to kind of show something on your resume, like explain it. Look at your resume and explain to them where that was and what you did there. I mean, it's just posture, being yourself, mimicking the employer. I mean, there's a lot of different ways. Paul, I know Paul's on this call. If you, from your experience, if you have any kind of things that stood out to you that really shows enthusiasm.
Hey everyone. Yeah, Ryan introduced me at the beginning of the call, was having a couple tech issues, but I work very closely with Ryan. I've been at Total Quality Logistics for about 4.5 years. I work in our Richmond, Virginia location. But yeah, going off what Ryan said, I mean, I think there's some things you can definitely do beforehand. Prepare for the interview. Do some research on the company. Ask lots of questions during the interview. And ultimately, express your interest when you're having a conversation with whoever you're being interviewed. Flat out say it. Hey, I'm highly interested in this position. Just kind of a couple quick points for me.
Ryan, I'll ask this as a follow-up because you talked a good bit about behavioral interviewing and sort of doing situational interview answers and things like that. How much is too much of detail when you're talking about different situations where you've had experience? Because I get asked that a lot from students as you're prepping all those STAR methods and all that kind of stuff. How much is too much detail?
So you mean like when a candidate's talking too much in depth about those situations? Yeah, I think listen to the question, right? And if they say, explain to me a time in the past that this happened, or tell me about what you did in this situation, or a time when this occurred, or you dealt with a tough obstacle or situation, or big question I like to ask is like, explain to me sacrifices that you had to make to be successful in your career. And look at that question, and all they're asking about is, show me an example of when you had to make sacrifices to be successful, whether it's in a job, if it's in your schooling career. I can tell you now, I sacrificed a lot of years of my life from staying up till 3 a.m. studying, like most of you probably have in your college career, probably especially the ones about to graduate and exams coming up. So I think it's all about being kind of clear and point to the question. Think about, again, your background, and if there is a specific situation or sacrifice you made, explain to them, there was this time in this position or this time in school, I was in this situation, and it was this is kind of what I was going through, and this is what I was having to deal with. In order to kind of overcome that specific obstacle, this is what I had to do. These are some of the things I experienced. This is what I had to do, but this is what I got in reward or in return for doing that thing. And leave it at that, but make sure it's genuine and it's a specific example. Again, I'm the type of person that likes to get sidetracked and just start rambling, as you probably can tell. But yeah, you just kind of want to understand that specific situation, make sure it is genuine. It's an actual specific situation that you've gone through. So explain what the situation was, what you were going through, what you learned from it, and how that's kind of molded you into what you're able to bring to the table now in the future and whatever the company you're interviewing for.
Can you talk a little bit about TQL's currently open positions? Are you still hiring interns or full-time positions? And then I've got another question after that.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So currently, I mean, we're focusing on full-time opportunities. Internship is something that we did have in the past, and I'm not 100% sure if it's something that we may revisit just because of the industry and the market that we're in. I mean, we hold a large portion of the market, being the second largest freight brokerage firm in the nation. So we just have so many sales reps that are blowing up, right? Especially right now in this current pandemic. People are breaking records because in reality what we do is we help customers move product when others might not be able to. So especially right now, customers are trying to get their product to move, trying to get their groceries in the stores, I mean, wherever their product is going, whatever it is, especially now more than ever. we're growing faster than we've ever anticipated, and we're excited about continuing to grow. So that's why we're just primarily really focusing on full-time opportunities.
Very cool. And then another question was, in order to make your interview very interactive, what are some good conversation starters to help do that and make that conversation a little more relaxed, or maybe not as formal and like take an oral exam?
Yeah, I love that. Or genuine, I think, is the word I like to think of. I'm a big believer in first impressions. That goes from your handshake, right? I don't want to say I judge people by their handshake, but I definitely pay attention to it. And also those first questions that you ask when they're getting to know you, right? I in college used to work at a golf course, and I remember actually TQL asked me this question. They asked me, "What's one of your biggest pet peeves?" And I said, "My biggest pet peeve is when people ask me about the weather." I told them, when you get asked initially, how's it going? It's pretty nice outside. Or they talk about the weather. I always tell people, like, they probably mean something else. That means that they don't know what to talk about. It's just some kind of topic that they can relate to, and they know that they're going to respond and say, "Oh, it's nice outside," right? I just think if you're going to ask a question, first of all, make sure it's genuine and it's an actual question that you're wanting to know about. So if you're asking, "How's your day?" like, be prepared to kind of not just ask it, and then they say, "Well, my day's good. I'm actually doing this and that. I'm actually going to this place later on today." Like, show genuine interest in what they're saying. "Okay, cool. I've never been there." Whatever the case may be. Conversation starters. When it comes to an interview, I think the questions more so catered to just like building rapport, initial kind of contact. Interview questions obviously is, tell me a little bit more about the company or your time here. What do you, whatever expectations are. But conversation starters, I would just, yeah, asking about the person themselves, their time here and what's kind of gotten to this point. I just think genuine questions about the person you're interviewing, wanting to get to know them, find out a little bit more about their background with the company, where they came from, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I was about to say. Is always ask. You can always ask people about how they got with the company too. That's a great thing because companies are smart. They're not going to put people in front of you to interview who don't really like what they do. But so they'll be glad to talk to you about it. So that's a good question. Any last questions or things like that before we let Ryan and Paul go to? All right. Well, thank you again, Ryan and Paul, for being here and sharing information about interviewing. Any last things about Total Quality Logistics you want our crowd to know?
No. Again, I've interviewed for one company since my college career, and interviewing for entry-level positions it's one of the most exciting things ever because of the place that I came from and not having any experience really to now just full-time starting my career. So, again, this is the opportunity here at TQL isn't just for people that have had sales experience or specifically looking for sales. We look for people that are genuinely wanting to work hard and see results based upon their just genuine drive. I've seen people that have had years of sales experience and done great and not done great. I've seen people that have flipped pizzas and have come here and made $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 a year based on just genuine hard work and desires for what you want to be, where you want to be, how you're going to get there. So, yeah, I mean, I tell everyone, again, if you are looking for a position where you do want to, again, put in hard work and see results based on that, we're a company that provides you with all the training you can possibly need. So, obviously, I have some contact information I can send over to Jay, see if he's able to send that to you guys. TQL, you can see those slides. If you go to tqljobs.com, we do hire and recruit nationally. Between 57 offices nationwide, so I know a lot of people might not be in Charlotte after college, which is where I'm based. Some people might be moving wherever in the country they are from. There's 57 offices out there, so if you do have interest, I'd love to have a conversation with you just about opportunities here. And also on top of that, my contact information you can see is in the chat. Feel free to screenshot that or save that. Don't feel like if you have to reach out to me, it has to be about TQL. If you have any questions based on interviewing or need some kind of advice, I mean, shoot me an email, give me a call, let me know. If you want me to look over a resume for you, I'd be happy to help. But yeah, just hope everyone can utilize me as a resource, and hope to speak with everyone soon.
Well, that's great. Ryan, thank you again for being here, and thank everyone for participating. We really appreciate it.